And welcome everyone to our weekly call. As always, let me just quickly share my screen as a reminder of what we're talking about today. So the main topic of conversation for today, I probably should have asked Carolina for a better sort of title than this. This is my unimaginative and very descriptive title of an internet standards tracker. There must be a more imaginative name than that, but anyway, Carolina, not Caroline, apologies. So her sister Carolina from the DNS Research Federation will shortly be taking us through where the team are at in the development of an internet standards tracker. I think with particular emphasis on tracking the IETF standards developments, but that will emerge through the presentation. And then we talk about a few sort of developments from the last week or so, probably with a sort of a cybersecurity bias, I think, this week, judging from some of the headlines. I'll remind you some forthcoming events and just time permitting, a quick heads up on some future core topics as well. So hopefully that's consistent with everyone's expectations. And I'll answer a question that Michael's just popped in the chat, which I've just seen, which is, should weather reports be distributed by encrypted or plaintext DNS? If only Peter was on the call. I'm sure he could tell us how you could already achieve either of those options with DNS anyway. I'm sure that is true, but he's not on at the moment, so we'll have to wait and see. Good question, though, Michael. Right. Anyway, let me share a different screen because I'm driving the slides today. So apologies in advance if I press the wrong button at the wrong time. And while I'm doing that, also, Carolina, if you want to unmute, thank you for coming on the call again to sort of just give us an update on the standards tracker. And I think when we discussed the timing, it was in the hope that it might be possible to talk about the IETF standards tracker in particular. So I wait with bated breath to see if that's actually been proven possible, or the vagaries of actually developing this stuff have meant that's slightly in delay. So let's wait and see. But anyway, over to you. Thanks for joining. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Carolina Caeiro. I am Senior Internet Policy Specialist at Oxford Information Labs and the DNS Research Federation. And within the DNSRF, I lead our standards analysis work, including the Internet Standards Observatory and the standards tracker that I will be presenting about today. So I guess I wanted to start by thanking you, Andrew, for having us again on your weekly call to speak about the Internet Standards Observatory. I think we were just discussing, I first presented this work, I want to say in April or May of last year. Since our last presentation, we've managed to accomplish quite a bit of work, which I'm excited to show you today. So let's get started. Next slide, please, Andrew. There we go. So a quick word about who we are at the DNS Research Federation. We are a UK-based non-for-profit organization. I normally tell my parents that we are in the business of making sense of the internet through data, specifically by helping to connect the dots between the DNS and cyber policy. And I believe you recently had a number of presentations from colleagues from the DNSRF on the work that we've done on blockchain domains, resolver capabilities testing, and other projects. So you're probably quite familiar with some of our work. And I'm here today to speak to you about internet standards, which is also a key policy area for the DNSRF. And generally speaking, our approach to standards work, as other work that we do at the DNSRF, is quite data oriented, in that we literally sort of process and do text analysis on standards proposals through our data analytics platform. And today I will be speaking specifically about some of the standards tracking tools that we have developed. Next slide, please. All right, so starting with the presentation, the Internet Standards Tracker that I will be presenting today is part of a larger initiative by the DNS RF called the Internet Standards Observatory. This is a project that we're doing with funding support from the Internet Society Foundation and the RIPE NCC. And the goal of the Standards Observatory really is to prevent Internet fragmentation as driven through standards. And the way we do that is by supporting the identification of standards proposals that may fragment the Internet's technical core, which means we are currently focused on tracking standards proposals that could transform how we do addressing, naming, networking, or routing on the Internet. Next slide, please. So why track Internet standards? So two reasons primarily. We found that some standards proposals were being discussed in the context of ITU-T, even though these sort of clearly belonged in SDOs such as IETF. And we wanted to sort of raise awareness about those proposals under development and under discussion at ITU. And whenever proposals were being discussed in the RIPE fora, we also wanted to highlight Internet drafts that could really sort of shape the Internet of tomorrow and sort of encourage active engagement from the Internet community with those proposals as well. So a message I always like to highlight when presenting the Standards Observatory is that we think that standards development processes are really an opportunity to make the Internet better. So with this project, we want to encourage that Internet standards be developed in the right fora. And we also want to ensure that, we sort of the standards in the Internet communities have thorough conversations about how we want the Internet to evolve and the standards that need to be in place for that. Next slide, please. So the heart of our Internet Standards Observatory is the Standards Tracker. The tracker is essentially a tool that allows us to identify standards proposals by topic of interest. What we do is, for the SDO of interest, we ingest into our data analytics platform all the standards proposals under discussion. We then scan for specific sets of words or phrases of interest. In our case, as I said before, we're interested in proposals that would represent a departure from how we do networking, routing, naming, and addressing on the Internet. And we then produce a risk score for each of the proposals. And that way we're able to rank proposals and sort of highlight those that we find more problematic. And our three categories of how we risk score proposals are engage, monitor, and track. The three SDOs of focus of our standards tracker are ITU-T and IETF, and for those two, we have already developed and launched our trackers, and that's what I'll be showing you today. And we'll be also launching a third tracker for ETSI, hopefully in the coming months. Next slide, please. All right, so what I want to do now is show you what the standard tracker looks like. So the first thing I'll do before I continue with the slide is actually paste in the chat the actual link to the standards tracker. So as I'm showing the tracker on the slides, you can also go to the website and check the tracker yourself. Next slide, please, Andrew. So the trackers I mentioned, we have it available for two SDOs, ITU-T and IETF. So we'll get started with the one for ITU-T. Next slide, please. All right, so this is what the tracker looks like. On the top of the screen, you can see in the case of in the case of ITU, we're tracking a specific number of study groups. These are study group 13, study group 16, and study group 17. These are the groups that are dealing with future networks, multimedia and digital technologies and security. And these were some of the spaces where we were seeing proposals come up, that we felt had the potential to fragment the internet, or proposals that we also found, would be best sort of developed and discussed in SEOs such as IETF. So essentially what we do is we offer sort of trackers for each one of those study groups. So, when you go on the website, you can actually click on any of those groups. And we provide you with a list of proposals that our system has identified as priority proposals that require some level of attention or engagement. So in this case, you can see that for study group 13, we have a total of 32 contributions that our system is flagging. Next slide, please. So beyond providing this list of proposals for engagement, you can actually have sort of a closer drill down into each one of the proposals that we're flagging. So if you click on the arrow on the right-hand side, you'll be sort of provided with this information about each one of the proposals. So as you see here on the screen, we picked one that we had flagged as a proposal that requires engagement. So for that proposal, you basically are able to see the contribution title. You're able to see the proponent organization, what the proposal is about, and what's being proposed for standardization. So we can see this is a proposal that discusses multi-access edge computing. It's about low latency distributed ledger technologies. In terms of what's being proposed for standardization, we see ICN, so information-centric networking, deterministic communication services, deterministic networking. And you can also see at the bottom the use cases for this. So virtual reality games, industrial controls, and so forth. Next slide, please. So beyond being sort of provided with this information on the specific standards, we also enable users to do filtering to find things that they're interested in. Again, on the screen, we're seeing study group 13. Say you were participating in the March meeting that actually started today. You could select the March meeting on the left-hand side of the screen. You could also filter by other categories. For example, say you were interested in honing in on new work items. You can also select that and sort of view a specific subset of the proposals that we are flagging as potentially controversial documents. Next slide, please. Here we see another example of filtering, which we also like to show to potential users because they always find it quite useful. Say you were interested in filtering by use cases. Here we have selected augmented reality. You can see again the proposals that we are flagging. They're being discussed in study group 13 that deal with that specific use case. Next slide, please. I think, we're on to IETF, which is actually our new tracker, which we're really excited to show to folks because this is a new tracker that we launch in the new year. So next slide, please, Andrew. So the structure for IETF is similar but slightly different. So the organizing principle for the tracker for IETF is actually the IETF meetings. So here at the top of the screen, you can see that we have IETF 118, IETF 117, 116, and 115. As of next Friday, you'll be able to see IETF 119 also displayed on the tracker. And the way, I actually, do want to sort of elaborate on this because I think it's an interesting thing to sort of share with the group. The way we are able to sort of identify the proposals that are being discussed at each IETF meeting is actually by scraping the meeting materials. And essentially what our system does is it searches for words that include draft dash, which basically means it's discussing an internet standard. We scrape those, verify that there's an associated standard or internet draft on the data tracker. And that way we're able to infer how many standards proposals or internet drafts, I should say, are being discussed at each one of the meetings. And those are basically the ones that we analyze within each one of these sort of bubbles or subsets. In this case, we're quite lucky with IETF because there's a lot of data available on the different standards. So we are able to sort of very easily pick up lots of data points on the standards proposals. So we've organized them in sort of 3 categories of items that you can filter by, which tell you where the standard is being discussed, what the standard is about, and the standard status as well. Next slide, please. All right, so just like in the ITU-T tracker, the system also enables you to take sort of a deep dive into the different standards proposals that we're highlighting for tracking. So in this case, we have a proposal on computing aware traffic steering gap analysis. So you're able to see the proposal title, the risk scoring that we give in the proposal, and again, where in the agenda the proposal is being discussed, what the standard is about, and then the standard status, which in this case it's cut off, but it's active, and this I believe is an individual submission. So again, this gives you an overview of the proposal, and you can basically assess very quickly with this information whether you find this is something of interest, something that you might want to potentially engage with or track. Next slide, please. And again, much like in the ITU tracker, the filtering on the left-hand side enables you to filter by topics of interest. So in this case, if you were interested in use cases related to the metaverse, you can see which standards proposals, again, we flagged as potentially controversial that cite the metaverse as a potential use case. Next slide. I also wanted to take this opportunity to show you a little bit of the back end of the standards tracker, which I think will offer some insights into our methodology. Next slide, please.
Lena, just before I advance that, just picking up, because it's topical, Patrick in the chat has asked the question, why track per IETF meeting instead of IETF working group, or for that matter, area? As most discussions are per email lists anyway. So was there any particular reason for going for the meeting?
Absolutely. That's actually a great question, and we are still open to feedback as to how to structure the IETF tracker. So we originally started thinking we would do the tracking by group. And one of sort of our target audiences, I guess, for the tracker are standards participants. And we found that a lot of people, when they do their preparation for a given meeting, they basically sort of base their preparation on what's on the agenda, right? So what, working groups are actually meeting at the event. We felt that could be sort of a reasonable organizing principle that would give you would allow you to really sort of hone in on the meeting at hand, if that makes sense. The left-hand side column actually also enables you to filter by group. I'm just trying to see. So if you do where the standard is being discussed, you can see where on the agenda, and that tells you in what working group the standard is being presented. And I believe that the standard status, when it's actually adopted by a specific group, would tell you also, what group is shepherding the work as well. So there's those 2 ways of actually filtering that information. So you can still access it, but the organizing principle for the time being is meeting. But we're open to basically, get feedback from the community if they feel that, other organizing principles work better, we might sort of change it in the future. So that's great feedback. And thank you, Patrick, for raising that. Thank you, Andrew. So very quickly, I wanted to walk you through the back end of the platform, again, to just give you a sense of how we arrived to this trackers that we're showing you today. So the first thing that we do, as I mentioned before, is we input all the documents that are being discussed at a given SDO. So for a study group, it'll be, for the March meeting of study group 13, we'll take in the 200, 300 documents that are being discussed for that meeting. In the case of IETF, we're basically taking the drafts that are discussed at a specific meeting. Next slide, please. We then do what we call the document indexing, which is essentially pulling from the contribution or the internet draft rational information like the title, the authors, an abstract, the full text of the document and other sort of data points that we use then throughout the front end of the tracker. And we also develop dictionaries. Here we're highlighting one example, which is the about words that are basically sets of words or phrases that we then use and sort of track for in the standards proposals that we are analyzing. And I'll also touch briefly on the scoring configuration so that I can give you a sense of how the scoring actually is done. Next slide, please. So here you have an example of our dictionaries. These are the about words. The way we develop the dictionaries is by DNS research, where we analyze proposals that we have found problematic in the past and sort of pull sort of terms and technologies that are being sort of described in those documents. And we also do another process. We let the data speak to us as well. I want to say, every 3-4 months, we also analyze frequently occurring words in the document, and that way, we're able to identify new terms for inclusion in our trackers. So it's not just sort of top down how we develop the dictionaries, but also sort of bottom up, if you will, based on what the data is telling us, in terms of sort of new terms, or emerging proposals. Next slide, please. And this slide shows you our scoring configuration, which is pretty straightforward. Essentially, what we do is we track for the dictionaries in the text of the proposals, and we give different dictionaries different weights. And we also have thresholds for how often the words appear in the document as well. And that way, we're able to generate the scoring, the rescoring that you see. Next slide, please. So very quickly, in terms of next steps for the standards tracker, we, as I said, the Internet Standards Observatory and the trackers, the way they stand today, are funded by the Internet Society Foundation and the RIPE NCC. And we have this very sort of specific focus, as I said, on anything that might change the internet way of networking, essentially. Sorry, and that's my cat featuring on the screen there. In discussing and sort of presenting the tracker to other people, we've heard a lot that people are interested in actually searching for their own terms. So we have enabled a search box, and we want to improve those searching functionality so that people that want to use the standards tracker for tracking topics of their interest can also do that. We're also looking in the future to expand topic coverage. Essentially, areas where we're thinking of expanding the analysis to are emerging technologies primarily. So tracking specifically proposals related to metaverse, quantum, network trust, distributed trustworthy identities, and other issues of interest. So we're hoping to do that in the near future as well. We're also looking to expand the number of study groups that we're covering in ITU. Again, sort of speaking to standards participants, we're hearing sort of appetite or interest for expanding the work to other study groups where people are seeing sort of problematic proposals come up. So we're in the process of doing that. We've also been doing quite a bit of AI powered text analysis for other projects conducted by the DNS Research Federation. So we're looking to apply those methodologies to the standards tracker as well. So we'll be, hopefully deploying that feature also in the near future, so that we're not bound by, sort of specific matches with, phrases and words in our dictionaries, but that we can also look for semantic meaning of documents. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we're also looking to develop a tracker for ETSI. So that's also forthcoming work. So a lot of things planned for the next stages of the tracker. Next slide, please. And lastly, I wanted to wrap up with a couple of quick slides just to say that as part of the work we do with the Internet Standards Observatory, we want to sort of provide the community with a bit of context about what's transpiring across different SDOs and sort of trends, provide trends, insights on trends and analysis on developments across different SDOs. So we have what we call the Knowledge Center of the Internet Standards Observatory, which consists of a blog, basically. We actually started the blog also at the beginning of the year. We have 2 articles already published by our colleague Mark McFadden, one on ITU, one on the forthcoming Birds of a Feather on the DELEG proposal, which will be, I think, a topic of conversation in Brisbane. And we'll have a forthcoming piece also next Friday on CATS, which is the Computing Aware Traffic Steering Group, which we are, actively tracking through this work. Next slide, please. And we can actually go to the next slide, just to say as well that as part of the funding from the Internet Society Foundation, we are supporting research on sort of the intersection between Internet standards and Internet fragmentation. We are actually funding 7 academic research projects, which you can see here on the screen. And we're going to be organizing a roundtable discussion in April. So if anyone is interested, on the chat, please, let me know. We can, invite you to join those presentations. But yeah, just the research and the blog articles, again, together with the standards tracker are meant to really help the community get sort of a more complete picture of the standard setting world, and yeah, and hopefully, contribute to preventing internet fragmentation through standards. So I'm happy to take any questions, and yeah, thank you all for your time.
Fantastic. And I love to see the word epistemic. That's that sort of word that should be used more often. Right, let me stop sharing and just give people a chance to think, Carolina. So the sort of use case for this could be for someone that was, for example, planning to go to the ITF meeting in a couple of weeks' time. This could help signpost potential areas that they should spend some time looking at for potential to follow, that sort of thing. Is that the sort of use case amongst obviously many others?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly right. And we've had colleagues from, I want to say, private sector, technical community use the tracker. And what I think it's been sort of helpful for some of them is, when they do work, say, on a specific group, right? And I can think of a colleague, who, focuses primarily on everything related to DNS operations. And, he's very much on top of what's transpiring within that group. But the moment we highlighted other work was going on in other spaces that he felt was relevant, he engaged basically in other groups he wouldn't normally follow. I can think of another example of a colleague from the technical community who follows issues related to RPKI quite closely, and some proposals that sort of falling through the cracks that they weren't sort of aware of that were being discussed, and this was a way of sort of making sure that you're on top of what you need to be on top of, I guess, on the agenda, and also, I guess, flag the existence of some of these proposals, to people that perhaps are not aware of some of this ongoing work. I would say that's the use case in the case of IETF. We also hope for, I guess, the ITU-T tracker, and again, thinking of sort of people that would normally attend IETF, we hope that the tracker is also a way of raising awareness about work that's perhaps, taking place beyond the scope of IETF, that's actually close to IETF related work. So we also see the tracker as an awareness raising tool in some respect as well.
Cool. And if it flags up a particular paper, can I click through to the paper?
You're going to be able to do that for IETF, but in the case of ITU, the documents you can only access if you're a member. So the DNS Research Federation is a member of the ITU-T, which is why we access the documents ourselves, but we can't link those publicly. So if you were interested in reading one of those documents, you would, have to basically engage a member of ITU-T to have access. Yeah.
Of course, yeah, brilliant. Okay, there's a question in the chat, and then I will come to Simon. Tal asked a question about how's this all funding? Because obviously, how's this all funded? Because there's a lot of labour. I know you mentioned RIPE, NCC, and the what are the foundations?
The ISOC Foundation. That's right. Yes. So yeah, the way this is funded, so we did a pilot for DCIT on basically testing whether there was any way to automate standards analyses for ITU-T. We did this back in July of 2022. And it was an exercise that we embarked on because we wanted to address, I guess, an issue facing, many country delegations, which is the fact that it's so time consuming to prepare for ITU meetings, that you have to go through so many documents. So we did this pilot with them, and from that work and a series of roundtable discussions that we held back in 2022, we came up with the idea of the Standards Observatory, turned that into a proposal and secure funding from the ISOC Foundation. We get $250,000 from them. We're entering our second year of work on that grant. And then we received 34,000 euros from the RIPE NCC. So those are our sources of funding for this project.
And I presume you'd welcome alternative funding if anyone else on this call is feeling generous.
Indeed, yes.
Brilliant. So if Salesforce want to contribute, I'm sure that'd be well received. Anyway, Simon, you've had your hand raised. I can see why you might be interested in this, but I think you have a question. And you're on mute.
Yeah, it's querying me because I've not used Zoom on them on the web browser on here before. Two things, please. Firstly, how do you view AI tools coming into the market? I've recently had some correspondence with Apex, who are launching something of this ilk. Do you see any traction there in sort of joining these two things together? And secondly, when you say ETSI, a lot of their output, of course, is publishing 3GPP mobile standards. Would you include that in the list of standards from ETSI, or just ones that are just generated within ETSI itself?
So I'll start off with the second one. So for the time being, we're thinking standards generated by ETSI itself. ETSI is so different. We're, sort of late in launching that tracker because it's, we're figuring out the best way to structure the tracker, basically, to reflect the way work happens at ETSI. And then if I understood the first question correctly on the use of AI tools, we found, so we've done a number of projects for AUDA, which is the Australian CCTLD, analyzing contributions to the Global Digital Compact using AI. So an entirely, just to sort of summarize for the group, there were 170 contributions, and we basically, processed them through the system from scratch in 7 days, trying to sort of figure out what data we could sort of pull from the documents. And we basically did thematic analyses using AI, and it worked really, really well. So I think the sort of AI tools for anything text analysis related are quite powerful. We're yet to test whether in the context of very technical documents like standards proposals, whether semantic meaning is interpreted in the right way. So whether we can actually, use those same tools to look for synonyms, right? So, test, I don't know, say deterministic networking, whether the system understands correctly the meaning, to be able to, fully use it in our scoring system. What we've done in sort of prior projects using AI analysis is obviously we have sort of a threshold of how likely, say, a paragraph or a sentence is likely to match the word or the term that you're sort of looking for. You can you always make that threshold high, just to make sure you're not getting any false positives, if you will. But we're in the process of sort of testing that out and seeing whether whether it's feasible really to apply it to this work as well.
Great, thanks for that. I missed the sort of in Tony's comment to the question about funding. It put about sort of sustainability over the years. Is this, how sustainable is this? Any thoughts on that, Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, so everything we've done is fairly automated, which is a good thing. We're confident that the trackers as they stand can continue running. I think to sort of keep them fit for purpose, you need to keep investing in them. So I guess sustainability is a challenge for everyone working on this type of developments and tools. And yeah, as you mentioned, we're open to ideas for how to make it more sustainable, ideas for funding as well. I will say, we try to be very sort of open about all the work we do. So we open our dictionaries. We're opening also the sort of the code behind the standards tracker. So yeah, we're hoping also one way of progressing the work may well be through working on collectively on the sort of open development of some of the moving pieces of the tracker. One of the things I'm hoping to do is to have our engineers join us at IETF so they can participate in the hackathon, and we can even present some of the work that we've done. Even things like being able to tell whether a standard is being discussed at a meeting or not is something that could perhaps be an enhancement to the data tracker that our organization can contribute to, and I'm sure a lot of people can also fit into our project as well. So we're exploring that, I guess, is the answer.
Thank you. It feels entirely appropriate to use the IETF hackathon to do tooling for the IETF. That feels like a really good thing, in my humble opinion. Okay, does anyone else have any other questions? And if you do, either to sort of follow Simon's example, raise your virtual hand, or by all means put something in the chat and I will read it out loud if that is easier. And just while you're thinking, see if there are any others, I have to say, since I will be doing a summary of some of the what look to me like highlights of the agenda when we do a preview of Brisbane this time next week, perhaps we should compare notes, Carolina, to see what the tracker sort of highlights versus what the human being does.
Absolutely, let's do that. Yes.
Fun to do. All right. Well, I'll prepare mine first, so we won't cheat, and then we can compare notes afterwards, just to see where the differences are. Right. Doesn't look like we've got any other pressing questions at the moment. So I think that was really good. It was good to see that sort of developed from the early days, Carolina. And I think a number of us that grapple with complex agendas, whether it's the ITF, I know my sort of friend Arno, who's not on the call this week because he's busy at the ITU he always tells me how complicated the agenda is there. So it'd be interesting if the chairs and vice chairs would find benefit in tooling to sort of make sure they don't miss stuff as well. Perhaps Warren, you should sort of draw that to Arno's attention.
I will definitely do that. I was with him in Geneva the week before last, and the number of technical documents has doubled in the last 12 months. They're up to 400 plus that they're being asked to consider in each working group. So tools like this, which actually help you keep control and find things, because I'm an assistant editor on a very, very minor piece. And that was my first meeting, and I still don't understand what I was doing.
Gosh, you could probably have a sort of a charging system and really bump up the charges for sort of working group chairs. They probably, or study group chairs, they probably pay a fortune if they've got to get through 400 papers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And their systems may not be very 21st century. Let's say there's a lot of uploading of Word documents with revisions on them that have to be merged together. So yes.
Fantastic. Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you, Carolina. That's really good. And yeah, we'll compare notes to see what each of us pulls out independently for attention on Monday then. Grand. Right. Well, let's just seamlessly change the subject from there, just to quickly look at some of the news headlines. I'll do this swiftly, just conscious of the time so we don't run over. So yeah, there's some DNS related stuff last week. So the Savvy Seahorse Gang, what a brilliant name for a gang, using DNS CNAME records to scam people. Who knew you could do such creative things with the DNS? And yeah, so there's a fair bit of coverage on that story. The one I sort of pulled out was on Bleeping Computer, but also with links to Dark Reading, and Infoblox also did a blog post on the topic. So that's potentially worth a read. And then separately, there was a separate scam on a wide range of sites, eBay, VMware, McAfee, amongst others, where subdomains have been compromised for phishing campaigns. So the DNS providing a rich vein of opportunity for bad actors in different ways. Also, just on that screen, you see Cloudflare publishing how they've sort of mitigated a couple of recent vulnerabilities found in DNSSEC. The key trap and one other. I can't remember off the top of my head what the other one was, but yeah, some stuff on that. I won't go through all of these, but there's a sort of plenty of other sort of good material this week for Jeff Houston, as always, on APNIC and DNS and UDP truncation. Further coverage, parts 2 and 3 of a 3-part series on China's NX domain data. We sort of discussed briefly part 1 on this call last week, and a post from Emily Taylor, also of the DNS Research Federation, on European cybercrime, and what else needs to change on legislation. And then finally, Eurodig and the Baltic Domain Days, which are co-located in June this year. The registration for both of those has just opened in the last day or so. So if you want to go to Vilnius in mid-June, registration is now open for that. There was a really useful blog post from the IETF some point last week, just on some sessions that people may find of interest, where perhaps they're sort of new topics, discussions only just getting underway, or that are relatively easy to engage with, so be of broad interest to a range of people, not niche things that you need to be involved in for many years to be able to follow sensibly. Also on ITF matters, the hot RFC session on Sunday evening. They're now asking for proposals for talks. If you've not been to that, you get 4 minutes. There's a sort of 2 hours of 4-minute sessions where you can just present on, I think, within reason, pretty much anything, but a maximum of 4 minutes. And it's a sort of fun thing to attend with a beer or two, just to see what's on people's minds. And then finally on ITF stuff, a reminder, if you're planning to attend either in person or remotely, today is the last day for early registrations as opposed to super early. So we're now in the early registration phase, and if you miss the boat tonight, then it goes up by a couple of $100, I think, for in-person, slightly less for remote, and that's the standard rate. And also, if you plan to put in any internet drafts, again, the cutoff is also tonight, 23:59 UTC, to be precise, for both of those. So register now if you haven't already and you plan to attend, and make sure you get any last minute internet drafts in the next few hours. And then, as always, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that caught my eye this week, a range of different topics, which I won't run through all those. It takes far too long, but plenty of stuff more on the policy side, cybersecurity, etc., etc. So so I'll lead you to click it through on any of those if you share my interests at your leisure. In terms of call for papers, I just should have deleted this one. You're just too late if you were planning to put in a proposal for Centre's Jamboree in late May. The cutoff was midnight last night, unless they've extended it. I haven't seen anything to say that yet, but if you've missed the deadline, it might be worth checking on the link to see if they put in a late extension, but I haven't seen an email to the effect, so you potentially missed the date. And then you can see there's a few things coming up deadline wise this week through to early next week, including there's a survey from the Internet Governance Forum, which has just been extended by a few days. So you've got to the 8th of March now for that. And then RIPE 88 coming up in Poland later on in the year. The deadline for submissions for that is the 11th of March, I think is next Monday. So that's coming up pretty soon now as well. So various things there just to be aware of. The sort of drumbeat of events continues. As you can see, we got well, if you were planning to go to ICANN's community forum in Puerto Rico, you're late unless you're already there, in which case you're presumably well aware of this. So that kicked off over the weekend and runs through this week. Echo have got a readout from that in a couple of weeks' time. You can see on the 14th of March, which will be a pretty time efficient way of catching up with everything that went on if you're not able to attend in person. And before we know it, we'll be into the ITF meeting in Brisbane, which starts on the 16th with the hackathon, and the sort of with a sort of welcome sort of social on the 17th, and the event meeting proper starting on the 18th, Monday the 18th in Brisbane, and so on with other stuff, as you can see, through month on month this year. And finally, from me, as I mentioned just now with Carolina, we'll be doing a preview of some interesting looking things on the agenda for the ITF meeting this time next week. We obviously won't have a call the following week because it clashes with the ITF, and I'll hopefully be fast asleep about this time. And then we'll do just a wrap up with some of the highlights from that meeting the following Monday, in case there's anything you missed. So and things continue on from there. So yeah, IETF themed over the next couple of calls, and then we'll sort of broaden out the agenda after that. So hope that's all good with everyone, and I'll stop talking, and as always, see if anyone's got anything else you want to mention. So if you do, either raise your hand or put something in the chat, whichever is easier. So anything that's on anyone's minds this week.
I'll bring up something.
Sure, fire away, Eric.
Went to Apricot last week. Spoke at a DNS OARC community gathering. A bunch of people attended. As part of the discussion, we're talking about, or actually, there was a talk where they said that either ICANN or someone else was funding more root servers being made available for Anycast deployments, which is usually it's like, oh yeah, great, more infrastructure. But Jeff brought up a really good point and reminded us that we don't really need more Anycast nodes out there. We probably need more adoption of local root. And it's it's the first, it wasn't the first time I heard about local root, but it was like it really sunk into me. It said, you know what? He's right. There's a lot of traffic and a lot of root infrastructure which wouldn't be needed as much, and attacks would be isolated much more the more people who are doing local root. So I would remind anyone on this call who is influential in the DNS community to look into it again and look at blog articles and stuff talking about it, because I think it could be, with all the technology that's being out there, the the closer this is all working to the end user, the better it's going to be. So so I just want to remind people about that.
Oh, that's a great point. That'd be an interesting side meeting, perhaps in Brisbane. I'm confident Jeff will be there, as it's a short drive from Canberra.
Well, I
But yeah,
mean, anyone, like anyone planning to do more, we need to do more at the root. Well, we need to change, if we're going to change all of DNS and everything, how much are we going to do at the root? How many more deleg queries are we going to be getting that are going to be busting into TCP, right? I mean, the more we have down at the resolvers, the better.
yeah. Great point. Hadn't heard that. Was it a good session, by the way, in Bangkok?
Interesting, yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, we had a whole bunch. We had a bunch of talks at DNS OARC. It's bring people locally from the community to talk about what's happening for them, but also bring in a couple people like myself to talk about things. My talk was about who do you trust, and like where are people, if there's a sea, I'm sorry, I don't have my camera on. There's sort of a sea change which is going to happen, which is if you don't take steps to make sure that you're doing everything that the big providers are doing, the users are just going to automatically choose for you when they, either have their browsers point their DNS somewhere else, or set it manually. People need to up level their game if they want to retain the trust of their users.
Yeah, well, I think trust will likely come up in Brisbane as well. But I'm confident that it will. I think that's a topic which is going to continue to raise its head for some time now. So yeah, really important one, that one, in my humble opinion. So good to know that you brought it up in Bangkok, Eric. Right, well, I don't see any other hands raised, can't see anything else on the chat, and we are just on the hour. So with that then, thank you again, Carolina, for an excellent presentation as always. And we'll do a little experiment this time next week and see what we surfaced manually versus the power of the machine, and compare. A nasty feeling which will be better, but we'll see. Anyway, with that, have a fantastic week, everyone, and see you same time next week for a preview of ITF 119. So speak to you all then. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
You're right.